explain to the audience what reconciliation is and why you think reconciliation is important?
Reconciliation for me is just a repair relationship in general, but when we're using it in the context of Indigenous and Canada and all the citizens in this country and the historical relationship they've had with Indigenous people, and how that relationship needs constant work on respect, rejuvenation. There's different ways you can look at reconciliation in our, I want to kind of, in this question, because we had got these before, the reason I'm stumbling is that reconciliation in Saskatoon, we've been doing this work since 2016 with the city. And I don't know if a lot of you know, but there's been a really good movement in the city. And in the city, we started off with maybe about 10 organizations. Now there's about 110 CBOs that work around the city building their own reconciliation efforts. We have a big walk on June 21st. And basically, it's expanded into reconciliations in Saskatchewan. So there's other towns and municipalities that are doing the work, and that's what they're doing. They're repairing and rebuilding and working on what's going well and not going well. But in recently, we just finished a book called Honoring the Declaration. It's the church commitment to reconciliation and the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And Usask has a chapter in here where one of the last chapters, and the book came out just a little while ago, before Christmas, and it took us a couple of years to work on it. And in here, they're talking about the reconciliation relationship in various different authors. The opening is with H. Henderson, and then we have academics from St. Andrew's College, and it's predominantly the United Church. So these are the types of reconciliation relationships and definitions that look different to each other, but you collate it, and it is part of this declaration of Indigenous peoples, and they're hoping that they'll be using this for their theology students in their classrooms and the general public. So that's my experience and understanding of reconciliation. It's ongoing, it's a buzzword, there's been money out there. I'm an active liberal as well, so when the ministers are around, we're always a few of us brown faces that are constantly trying to tell them what people are talking about in this part of the province. So reconciliation is a constant.
Thank you for that, Darlene. We're going to pass it to Delia next. If you can provide the audience, what actions have you taken or plan to take in the pursuit of reconciliation?
Thank you. What actions I have taken recently, more recently than in the past, is I speak to groups like this. I've spoken a lot in Toronto to the Unitarian Church, Ryerson University class, Brampton Library Youth. I spoke to the adjudicators of Ontario. I'm smiling at Helen because we used to be adjudicators in the Indian residential school process. And I spoke to the provincial group, mainly because I think part of the problem that we're faced with in understanding each other is that they don't really know us. They don't, that we're just people, that we have the ordinary hopes and responsibilities that they have. We're not different except for our culture and beliefs, and that we are full human beings. And I also speak a lot I've made a decision to speak a lot when called by the media. I've spoken nationally to the CBC, to CTV, to in Toronto, TVO, and primarily like when questions come up, for instance, when the Colty-Bushi report came out and about the RCMP report and also the other investigation. I spoke, I of course did it in such a way that I phoned their lawyer first to make sure that I didn't say anything out of line. I wanted to support the family because it was a traumatic time for that. And I do that because I think it's important for us as First Nations and those of us that are lucky to be educated to be in the forefront to explain those rather than having experts explaining how we feel about those things. So the whole question of policing, I get asked a lot because I was involved in 2 inquiries. One was the shooting death of Leo Lachance by a white supremacist and how it turned out that he was an RCMP informer and he was protected. And I always think that, I think this is going public, but I think I can say, but for the fact that he was an informer and he was paid for by the RCMP to travel across the North America to attend Aryan Nation KKK gatherings, that he became much more indoctrinated in hate against anyone who was not like himself. But for that, I still think that Leo Lachance would not have been shot to death. I was also involved, and so was Don over here, in the Dudley George. I was a lawyer for the family. He was killed at the Ipruvash Provincial Park because of us protecting his land from provincial land, the Bureau of Ground. Don was the commission counsel in the inquiry. So we both get called to speak on issues related to law matters, related to police. And this is a university group that I'm speaking to. So whatever you specialize in, it's very important to become knowledgeable in your field and to be willing to speak to the media because you're going across Canada and you're explaining yourself. Just for people to know that we are human beings with the rights of self-determination and the right to be respected as human beings. And that's the work I do in reconciliation.
Thank you for all your past work in standing up for the Indigenous community, Delia. Next, we have Terrence. Terrence, are there any barriers you have experienced in your journey of reconciliation? How would you suggest others get involved in reconciliation?
Okay, I'll get to the barriers, but first, getting involved in reconciliation. This is how I got involved in reconciliation, because I'm still always learning. I'm always wanting to learn more. And, well, first of all, read the Truth for Reconciliation, the Commission of Canada calls to action, all 94 of them. Read them over and over, and see if any of them like stick out to you. See if anything bears witness with you, and thinking, you know, hey, maybe I can do this, because that's something that I did and that I'm still learning. So one of them that I try, you know, to do within my business. So one of the calls to action number 92.2 is ensuring that Aboriginal peoples have equitable access to jobs, training, and education opportunities. So that's what we do as Prairie Farm. We wanted to be able to offer, given that opportunity to be able to have a trade. We are partnered with a lot of world-leading distributors, and where they can come into our work field and they can earn certificates, diplomas, and they're actually called apprentices when they're employed with Prairie Farm. And another one too is the non-profit Prairie Run Crew. So that's another thing we do, with Prairie Farm. It's, our social responsibility of giving back to the communities where we do business. In a lot of cases, who we employ is giving a certain amount of our monies that we earn to the non-profit Prairie Run Crew. So with the Prairie Run Crew, with number 89 is reduce barriers to sports participation. So I talked about a race start line. we look at a lot of these communities, and a lot of the youth we visit can't come to the start line. And one of those barriers is as simple as running shoes. Why can't you run? Why can't you come? Well, I don't have a good pair of running shoes. We have really good partners with New Balance running shoes, where we actually bring running shoes to the community so these youth can put on a pair of running shoes, and you should see them, putting on a pair of running shoes for the first time. And, lots of stories. There's one where the cocoon came up and said, I'm glad he's getting running shoes. I don't know if you know this, he was saving money to buy shoes, and he couldn't save enough because he kept spending it at the store. So now he has his shoes. So these are things that I did, I had to take upon myself, was to read all 94. And another thing, wearing orange shirts is good, participating in events on National Indigenous Peoples Day, June 21st, National Day for Truth Reconciliation, September 30th. All this is good, but this is a question that you really need to ask yourself, even on the daily. What can I do today? It's more than just wearing that orange t-shirt. Sometimes it's reading a book. You have a book right there, right? Supporting businesses, Indigenous businesses as well. Even on social media. Read a book, all those are really good steps. And you being here tonight is definitely a really good step that you're taking, for action. We always need action. And I really believe that we really need to, find out who we are, what we believe in as we learn and we walk together. We need to be able to align our beliefs with our actions and what we're doing. So you being here, I applaud you all for being here to learn. And I know it's fun to share, but we also know that you all have a story as well. So we hope that someday we can hear some of them. Thank you.
Amazing, Taryn. Thank you. So we're going to close with one last question. Because our topic is around cultural inclusivity, I'm going to ask the participants how they would suggest our audience members can incorporate cultural inclusivity into their lives. Because the purpose of this panel is to help our audience educate themselves and to learn more from this event. Taryn, do you want to start?
Sure. Alrighty. So think about this. Who are you? What makes you you? When you look in the mirror, who do you see? Who's looking right back at you? Where do you get all these feelings, your passions, your desires? Where does all that come from? When I look in the mirror, there's times when I'm looking, who's staring back at me. And a lot of times I remember a lot of my walks with my grandfather, Daniel Weesamawkasin, in roaming those areas. And I'm thinking, I bet he didn't call this Treaty 7 area. He just called it home. He didn't call it it was just our ways. It wasn't our traditional ways he called it. It was just, this is the way. So when I learned, I'm looking back, that's who I'm learning to become. And being able to be free, to be able to share that, to be able to express that in everything that I do, whether it's running, whether it's sharing, and so I encourage you also to be able to find out, who are you? Where did you come from? What do you believe in? And when are your actions aligning with what you believe in? Thank you.
Yeah, Darlene, you're welcome to go next.
For how to invite you to do this cultural inclusivity is going back to that bias that I was talking about when you're meeting somebody just brand new, is that first 10 seconds or maybe even 2 minutes, and just try to get I'm an anxious person to begin with. I've always been shy. I've always had to really work at being in the public, even as a little girl. But I love to learn. I love school, and I love my family. I loved going to the ceremonies we could go to. I think it's just to keep participating and to try not to feel awkward or uncomfortable. I'll talk about 2 settings that might help you understand what helped me. We have 2 amazing Indigenous lawyers here. During the National Inquiry, I was given the title of non-legal advocate from the Privy Council to get our contribution agreement to attend and do the expert panels and Indigenous knowledge stuff during the inquiry. And in there, I didn't know legalese at all. And we had to watch other lawyers do their thing. And I was so intimidated, but I trusted what I was seeing with them and just kind of picked up on that. The other thing is, in here in Saskatoon, I've really been a stretch to engage with Muslim community with my husband. We went to mosques and learned their cultural ways and their food and their clothes and accepting invitations. And I think that's one of the keys is if you're not busy, you're curious, is attend things. You don't necessarily have to organize it or buy special, regalia for it. Just observe. And that's where you just start having this understanding with each other. And I think that's a few things that could help engage yourselves to this work and this relationship.
Thanks, Darlene. Those are awesome ideas. And we'll close with Delia here.
Thank you. How would you suggest others incorporate cultural inclusivity, my three accents sometimes, into their lives? Well, you are doing that. You're practicing by being here. Those of you who are in attendance are interested in the subject, and I congratulate you for doing that. I can't really suggest that. I'm sure there's a lot of things, but the world has changed so much from my early years, where those of us who were in the residential school were so isolated in our world, and just coming into a different world. When I first attended post-secondary school, it was at a business college here in Saskatoon. I felt so strange, and there were some people that were very kind. I think kindness is important, generosity to other nations, to other races, to other people. That's what I found to be very helpful to me when I was a very green and isolated, pretty young person. I think so much has happened that I cannot really make recommendations at this point, because I've seen so many changes that are so valuable, and I just welcome people that have practiced cultural inclusivity in my life. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. In closing, I'm going to get each of you guys in 30 seconds to just tell us what the main message you would like the audience to take away from this.
The main message I want people to take out of this is kindness, generosity, resilience, hard work. We heard about this gentleman's life, being a hardworking person. That was my experience too. How I got through where I am now is just working hard. That's what my family, my parents instilled in me. They were hardworking people. JQ grandparents who were hardworking people. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I learned from that.
That's awesome. Thank you, Delia. Tarrant?
Know who you are. Be proud of who you are. Be willing to learn from others. And actually sit down and have a meal with your family, with everyone there. And you gotta keep trying. In my language, igakumat. Try. Just keep trying. When you add the agi igakumat, agi igakumat is no matter what comes your way, no matter if you can't see, agi igakumat, you have to keep going. Keep going with knowing who you are and being proud of who you are. And eat supper with your parents.
Thank you, Tarrant, for that.
Relationships. I think it boils down to how you maintain them and caress them. Like, you do have to caress the Indigenous relationship because we've been through a lot, but it doesn't mean that we're not open to having, mutual respect and understanding of what we mean to this land. And I think the other thing is listen to your elders, or there's this anti-movement going on, and uncle, memes out there on social media. But there's a lot of teachings behind those that right now I'm just struggling with our younger generation forgetting, in Indigenous communities forgetting that we, listen to your aunties and uncles and your mushrooms and gugums with the teachings that come with them. And some of those teachings are very universal, they're basic human rights, actions and behaviors. So those are the two things I want to leave with the rest of you today.
Thank you. So this concludes our panel portion of the event. I'm going to open the floor for a quick Q&A before we get the culture performance underway. So if any audience members have any questions, feel free to raise your hand and I can get you the microphone. Yeah, for sure. If you just want to stand, you have a loud enough voice, you can just speak it.
Okay. Well, my name is Jeffrey Wortman. I'm a student of psychology here at St. Thomas More and philosophy. I'm Canadian, but I'm bicultural. I'm also Mexican. I was raised in Mexico. And so part of my academic interest, I'm kind of old to be student, but anyways, I came back to university because I'm interested on, I have a project that I'm interested on fortifying what I call, in Mexico, we divide the self or the personality between tonal and nahual, it's called. Like it's, so the tonal is a part of us that has a rational conception of things. And the nahual is the part that just conceives things, but it's not a rational, but like a feeling or a conceptual, free understanding of things, right? So my project is, in a way, helping the Native American spirit, or nahual, we call it, and tonal, to fortify itself again. So in order for Native American people to be able to say, yes, this is the way my ancestors rationally thought. Not only, because the European tonal is strong because they have a very specific framework for present reality to each other, whereas I feel that my perspective is that natives, or after the colonization process, kind of lost that capacity because of the violence that was put against them. So my question, I guess, is like, if you guys are aware of somebody where I can connect with people that are kind of in the same interest of making a Native American formal system of thought.
I didn't really quite understand your question. Are you aware of what?
Somebody or some organization or some effort of people, academic or any kind of people that are trying to establish like premises of how the native thought, like, how to say it, probably it's hard for me to express what I'm trying to ask, I guess, but because that's kind of my interest. It's kind of how, because it's, for a white person, it's difficult to understand the way native people think, you know? It's sometimes that's the key for lack of inclusivity, because I experience it myself. People sometimes don't understand me, and it's not that I don't make sense. I know that I make perfect sense, but it's just the way they think, and the way they think doesn't match. So that's kind of my interest, right? Like, how can we make a way of...
Yeah, well...
We were both human, we both think, we both...
Yeah.
Well, we're thinking about psychology systems.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely different times than back in the, I know Treaty 7 was signed in 1877, so, the way my forefathers thought are definitely different than the way I think now.
Yeah.
Even the way I think now is different than the way I would think when I grew up. I lived in the era of where we didn't have cell phones. There was a time when we didn't even have phones. So I think what your best thing to do, it's great that you're seeking it, so I applaud you for that. But going to a place like Wanaskewin, having a tour there, they usually would have an elder, right there on staff that would be available. So I would definitely research, like that and going that route, because you're the best way to understand, our Indigenous mindset is they're all going to be different, right? Even from Blackfoot to Cree, right? It's so to have a definite answer, you won't get that, but you're definitely going to get an understanding with the First Nations people by sitting down with them. When we think about, our ceremonies, what we would do a lot of things in circles. Our teepee was in a circle. We would eat a meal in a circle. And a lot of that, for that reason, is because you can see everyone. Everyone had that opportunity to share what was on their heart and what was on their mind. So I think having said that, that's what you would have to do, is go out, sit with them, and see what's on their heart and their mind. And I would keep doing that. I don't think there's a definite answer, but just to understand them is to definitely, totally, 100% be with them, spend some time with them.
I concur.
In academia, there's the North American Indigenous Studies Association. So every year, or every few years, they have a big conference in different sites of North America. And there's about 200 abstracts accepted in various academic environments. And that would be a good place to start. The Native Studies Department, Indigenous Studies here is a really good spot to go and engage with them, because the former department head was their chair, Dr. Robbins. He's gone over to teach, but just go and find that literature. There's people used to think, I can't find anything on Indigenous studies. When I was in Indigenous Studies as the secretary, you wouldn't believe how many people would come in and just say, well, don't you have a pamphlet? And I was like, oh my God. There's like thousands of literature out there. The demand is so high for that knowledge and understanding. There's room for everybody. And finding that community that is that particular how do I say it? You have historians and you have sociologists, you have educators, and you have the psychologists. So the Indigenous psychologists that are out there, they have their own community. They know each other. Those are the people to engage with.
Thank you. We have time for one quick question, if one more audience member has anything.
An easier one, please. Uh-oh.
Yes.
Here.
Maybe not so much a question, but simply a comment and an observation. I would like to thank St. Thomas More College for putting this on, definitely. I think these are important events. They are timely events. And that the attendance, although seemingly sparse, is not at all sparse. What is sparse is the number of people I've seen, and we've all seen in the last 2 years. So this is really, really quite exceptional, and I thank you for putting this on. And to the panelists, the work that you do is incredibly important to educate ourselves, to educate other Indigenous people, and to educate all the newcomers who have come to our territories and want to understand us. It is important that this happens because our grandchildren deserve the kind of world that we want, that they want, and that they deserve. So thank you all for that. And incidentally, St. Thomas More is the patron saint of lawyers. So thank you.
Thank you.
My learned friend has said it all. Those are little cliche, but I really mean it, my learned friend.
Thanks for the lovely comment. So that concludes our panel event. Again, I would like to personally thank all panel members for your time tonight for coming out. You guys have each brought such a lovely perspective to the questions, as well as for helping educate the audience members. So at this time, we're going to bring the cultural performance on stage, and I'll quickly introduce them before they take over the microphone.